Manchester Orchestra is a rock band from Atlanta, Georgia. It's been touring pretty heavily since 2005. We're on our second LP now.
Other than music, none of us were good at anything else. So it was just kind of, or we didn't want to do anything else. So it was like, I guess we have to make this work.
Getting to make a record with Joe Ciccarelli was, mind-blowing. Getting to go on tour with the bands that we idolized growing up, like Kings of Leon and Brand New, getting to become really close with those guys. And of course, playing David Letterman was huge, especially for our families. We haven't been in this space very long, and it's a great space and a huge step from anything we've had before, but it's still a pretty unfinished space. We didn't have engineer come in and analyze the room and do acoustical treatment. We just kind of, did it on our own, within a very small budget. So a lot of the issues we were having were, way too much bass response in the room.
The control room had a really big problem with everything between 90 and 200. Kind of that very, very muddy, nasty frequency.
If we were able to get the music loud enough, it then just filled the room and made it, way bass heavy, very bass heavy, and, made it very hard to mix and have anything sound consistent on other systems. Initially, to try and fix those issues, we tried, just by using different acoustical treatments on the walls, trying to use sound diffusers, building baffles for the back of the walls, and it didn't really do too much to solve the big issues.
You didn't have time to compensate for the fact that the room was like that. So you would bounce down these tracks, throw them in your car, and all of a sudden the bass is just taking over everything.
So the Ergo system really was great for us because you're able to analyze the room and really more specifically take out the actual problem areas instead of blindly trying to treat the walls and treat the room and hope that it's going to fix the problem.
So once it was kind of able to be leveled out, it allowed me to do a quicker mix, not have to do as many revisions, and it also it cleaned up the mix because it cleaned up the room.
For our situation, being in a small studio and on a smaller budget, we don't really have the luxury of having big mains.
But it was hard finding a speaker that fit this room, especially, and that fit the music we were making. And when we got the KRKs, the VXT8s, it was able to represent the entire spectrum of the music we were making. It wasn't cutting out any of the guitars. We weren't having to boost the bass to get it to cut through or boost the kick to get it to cut through. But it wasn't hyped. They're not hyped speakers like some of the guys, You're like, oh, this mix sounds great. And it's like, of course it does. You're boosting it in all the sweet spots.
A lot of the time I want to have the guitarist in the tracking room and be able to turn it up loud, or even at mixing, we want to crank it up loud here. It's going to sound on a good loud system, but also be able to turn it down and mix at lower volumes and have the same clarity throughout.
Most people mix softly, which I try and do, just not tire my ears out. But when you want to hear the final thing, the first time you hear it, you want to blare it. And with the speakers, it enabled us to be able to sit in the back of the room, blast the shit out of it, and really still hear the clarity and still hear, everything the way it was recorded, the way it was meant to be, and the way we would play it live.
And we had actually used the Rocket 6s a lot in the studio I used to work at, and ended up, like we do here, using them in the tracking room. And we actually would set those up right in front of somebody in the tracking room, those tracking guitar. So with the success from those speakers that were so affordable and on such a small level, we looked to using them as our main speaker.
I'm able to now listen in our studio to tracks and to albums in the right environment. So now I'm starting to learn more and more how our room is supposed to sound and how that record is supposed to sound.
I think we often look back at one of the first meetings we had with our first manager, and Andy at one point, stated that, if we sold, I think he said 20,000 records, like, he would be happy. That was way beyond his goal ever. And our manager at the time was like, "You're crazy. Of course you're going to sell way more than that. I think you'll sell 100,000 or whatever." And that was just ludicrous to us at the time. That was not what our goal was. Our goal was just to be able to go to every city and have a few kids there, have 20, 30 to 100 kids that we could play to no matter what city we went to.